The following program is sponsored by RCP Productions Incorporated and Friends of the Shalom Show.
Thank you for joining us. Our special report on health and research will focus on new developments in treating cystic fibrosis, the genetic disease that causes lung infections that diminish one's breathing. Researchers have found that 2 new drug trials could benefit 90% of people with cystic fibrosis, with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's approval of new medicines calling it a breakthrough, and many lives will continue to improve until a cure is found. Cris Branden is the Broward and Boca Raton Chairperson of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and Bill Faloon, co-founder of Life Extension, will update us on this essential cause following these messages.
Life Extension magazine brings you new discoveries in health and anti-aging. Our science-based research and supplements are so advanced they're many years ahead of the medical mainstream, with quality control standards that exceed FDA mandates. Life Extension has covered groundbreaking medical research for more than 35 years. For your health and future, you deserve the best. Learn more at lifeextension.com.
Every morning and every night.
It's kind of hard to do treatments a lot, but it's kind of normal.
At just 15 months old, twins Evan and Brent Baker were diagnosed with cystic fibrosis.
It was devastating. Yeah, it was life-changing. I was a mom before CF, and then I was a mom after CF.
Pseudomonas is a common bacteria that is everywhere in the environment, and it doesn't really affect people without cystic fibrosis. But if you have that disease, it can really decrease your lung health significantly over time.
Dr. Patrick Main says new advances in treatment are now offering patients a better quality and quantity of life. But patients must be dedicated to their treatment and maintaining their health.
It's a combination of breathing treatment therapies. A lot of patients will be on antibiotics every day. Some will have inhaled antibiotics.
For the Baker twins, that means 3 hours of breathing treatments every day and high-calorie meals.
I'm constantly adding butter, ranch dressing, salt. They have to eat snacks 3-4 times a day. They drink protein shakes in between.
All combined with physical activity benefits their lungs, helping them fight off infection.
With us now are Bill Faloon and Cris Branden. It's a real pleasure to have you back on the show.
Very good to see you again.
Years. Bill, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Richard.
We're privileged to be here with 2 of the most outstanding supporters of important causes in Florida and perhaps in the world. And of course, I'm speaking in this case about one of your interests, which is cystic fibrosis. Please tell us about your involvement with that organization.
Yes. Well, I've been involved with the CF Foundation going back about 10 years now with the birth of my son. It's one of those calls that you never want to get. I unfortunately got that call, and like most things that we get involved with, we jumped right in with the foundation, and were encouraged with what we were hearing. Those therapies have really taken off since about 2012, when the FDA approved the drug Kalydeco. So I basically got involved with the CF Foundation as a board member, and then became the chair of South Florida.
What type of responses are you getting to those types of medications?
Tremendous.
I meant the percent of people who use them.
Yes. We started off when Kalydeco was first introduced. It targeted a very small population of the gene, of roughly 3%. We are now above 50%. With
wow.
these drugs, and with the 2nd and 3rd generation drugs that are coming out now, we expect the FDA to approve next year one of these 3rd generation combination drugs that will address roughly 90% of the CF population. It's not a cure, but it gives them a method to deal with this chronic disease, buys them time for when the ultimate
Very
cure
good.
comes.
So over a 7-year period of time, you've seen an exponential increase in the percentage of the efficacy of this drug. That's spectacular.
Tremendous. And again, coming at it 10 years in, it's hard to imagine how people dealt with this disease without all this, critical science that has come so fast.
Well, I recall them using N-acetylcysteine to try to break up the mucus accumulation, which
Right.
had a little bit of a palliative effect, but was no means
Right.
anything as efficacious as what you're describing.
The foundation was instrumental in developing these care centers throughout the country, the standardized care, and developed all these other therapies that, again, bought time to get us to this point and the ultimate cure, which I think we're all very optimistic that it's going to come.
It will. There's research that Life Extension has worked on with
Right.
some people at Harvard involving CRISPR-Cas9,
Right.
gene editing.
Yep.
And once we can correct the defective protein that
Right.
cystic fibrosis patients unfortunately have to deal with,
Right.
that will ultimately be the cure.
Yeah.
And we may only be 9 or 10 years away from that defective protein being eradicated.
Unbelievable. And that's what we view at the foundation. You walk in the doctor's office with CF and you walk out without CF, and that's going to be an exciting time.
Tremendous. Are insurance companies covering most of the cost of this drug?
Yes. Right now, healthcare is a very hot topic
Yeah.
on everybody's mind for a lot of reasons. But to date, most insurers are covering, and we've only seen a few instances where there's been some pushback in a state program. The drug companies don't want this to be a situation where they've got an effective drug that's very effective and it not being utilized because of cost. So
Understood.
there'll be some ways to deal with that.
No, that's tremendous to know that much insurance coverage is being made available. And what kind of survival improvements are you seeing? I mean, people who may have had, let's say, a 3 or 4 year life expectancy, how?
Here's where it comes in with cystic fibrosis. The disease progression was generally about average 2% decrease in lung function per year. So you are on a trajectory to when were you going to have a lung transplant if you survive that long.
Wow.
Again, before a lot of the therapies that came out, a lot of the new antibiotics that have been
Right.
developed, kids didn't make it to preschool. So that was the prognosis. Now, with these treatments that the foundation has made possible even before these modifiers, we've extended the average life expectancy to about potentially 40 years old. So it's getting
remarkable.
That's remarkable, but with these modifiers, now we're talking about a normal life expectancy. If you can get 10% functionality of that protein, we're eliminating lung transplants, which is tremendous.
This is something I don't think the public is fully aware of.
Again, we're an orphan disease, so
Right.
we don't have a lot of numbers. And as I should point out, as we increase the population of CF patients that are, from the 3% to the 90%, that should drive down the cost of the
Right.
drug as well. The more patients.
You did offer a 3-letter word, FDA.
Yes.
And I know that Bill, in his history of doing amazing things, has had a few little situations. Tell us about these obstacles.
Well, the FDA is good and bad. I mean, you definitely, as you know, when you're trying to develop these amazing medicines and treatments, you want to get it out.
Yes.
You don't want to keep it from folks. I think the direction of the FDA, and again, I'm no expert on this, but our perception is that it's getting better.
It is.
Not worse.
It's improving.
If you think about when you're running drug trials, particularly with people with CF, there are certain gene types of CF. There may only be 5 people that
Right.
have it at any given time, that are alive.
There's no question, we at Life Extension have been the harshest critics of the FDA going back over 35 years. I've written numerous books attacking them for delaying the introduction of new drugs. The good news is the current FDA commissioner was also one of the harsher critics of the FDA, and mainly because of the drug delay problem. So the fact that you're moving this through faster, great news for everybody.
It is. It's great, and I think my hope is that is extended to all types of diseases and treatments out there.
It needs to be, because we have every day in this United States 5,000 people dying of degenerative diseases related to aging.
Right.
And sometimes they don't get as much sympathy as childhood diseases, and we have as much sympathy for any human being, no matter what their age is.
With your focus, and it's interesting the dynamic with CF, we currently have, I mentioned earlier that the prognosis with this disease not that long ago was you didn't make it to preschool. Well, we now have over half of the sufferers of cystic fibrosis are adults.
Interesting.
So we're looking forward to dealing with aging issues with CF. It brings about a lot of challenges because, again, with these modifier drugs that we have out now and can continually improve, our young population is getting healthier and healthier and projected to. And that was the model for the cystic fibrosis, was the care centers that I mentioned, that, they built these great care centers. Well, like all medicine, care centers are dependent upon a certain amount of hospital stays and, to make the economics work.
Right.
Well, now we've got to have a fairly healthy young population. An older population we don't have the infrastructure in place yet to take care of. So it'll be a challenge, but it's one we're up to, I think.
And it's interesting because as they grow older, they're going to start contending with just normal age-related problems compounded with the gene expression problem that needs to be corrected.
Diabetes is a big one.
Of course. Yeah, I can imagine.
That comes about. So, there's going to be a lot of those issues.
Well, the tremendous news is what we did at Life Extension a number of years ago is traveled the world with a group of scientists to identify the genomic structure of super centenarians. These are people who lived well over age 100 in very good health. They normally do not die till over the age 110.
Right.
And we were able to map their genomic structure, and we donated it to Harvard and any other university that wanted to utilize that data.
Right.
And what they're doing at Harvard right now is seeking therapies so that we can all have the identical genetic predisposition of super centenarians. and if we do that, we're going to wind up curing a lot of degenerative illnesses and preventing most of them from ever manifesting.
Right. Think about the savings to the healthcare system, something like that.
Well, it'll cause healthcare to become a trivial expense.
Right.
Once we're able to.
That's a great.
Yeah, the typical super centenarian. Again, people living over age 100. Many of them have never been to a doctor, never had an illness until they reach 105 or 110. They're extremely rare, but their genomic profile is something we believe can be introduced into other people, so that we all achieve that incredibly long lifespan. And that gives science a lot of time then to find a way to keep even super centenarians from continuing to age.
That's interesting.
It's a lot of fun.
Area. Yep.
How science can really have such a wonderful influence on so many of the problems facing humanity.
A lot of truth. And science takes money, right?
It does. It does. And it sounds like you've done a great job. Can you give me some idea what kind of funding you've been able to raise?
The CF Foundation, and there's been studies around it, they use a venture philanthropy model.
Okay.
So they, again, being an orphan disease, the money that we raised, we partnered with the drug companies to assist some financial assistance with these trials. To make it, take a little bit of the risk off the table for them. And, fortunately, it led us to Kalydeco and then these next generation drugs that are coming out. But what the foundation did, foundation does not get involved with pricing or anything on the drugs, because that's not, we're not in business. We are a charity. But what we did retain was a royalty on the drugs as they came about. and then the foundation sold that royalty back, and we're talking billions of dollars,
Okay.
large numbers, and then now that money is being plowed back into research and accelerating the discovery of drugs. Both the modifiers and antibiotics are big. The CF population has to deal with. There's some pretty nasty bugs out there, and people with CF are more susceptible to them.
Are you able to let us know what kind of monies the CF Foundation was able to raise over its period?
So I'm going to deal in generalities. There's probably about, their budget was probably about 150 to 200 million a year. So if you think about it, the income they're generating on that royalty is covering that.
Okay.
So now all this incremental that we're adding is just, again, money buys science, and science
It sure
buys
does,
lives,
but those resources are just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
And the general public is totally in the dark about
totally
this.
in the dark. And CF was the first disease to find a modifier that actually corrected a protein, the defective protein in the disease. Other diseases will follow suit. So this research, and obviously you've been involved in a lot, it's going to spawn stuff for all kinds of breakthroughs in other diseases and illnesses.
Absolutely. Gene expression alterations are the underlying etiology of everything out there.
Right.
And cancer, vascular disorders, dementia.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
if you can correct those problems ahead of time, you prevent them. But
Right.
then if you can correct them even after the disease onset, you can
Right.
effectively treat that disease.
I think the art is going to be figuring out the model to keep science, keep the drug companies, because we've talked about this before. Capitalism, with whatever flaws it has, it is the best system.
Yes.
And we need to come up with pricing and payment mechanisms that address these situations. And maybe you pay over time, even though you don't have the disease anymore. You have some type of a way that they can recoup their funds.
What our life extension group has long advocated is if they can speed up the approval process, then the return on capital is accelerated.
Exactly.
So all of a sudden it's not so expensive
Right.
to bring out these drugs.
Right.
And
Right.
we've given many examples over the years where certain medications were available offshore
Right.
many years before they were made available in the United States.
Right.
In today's world, pretty much the drugs are first invented here for a lot of reasons. One being they can make more money here.
Right.
But
Right.
once they get FDA approval, then they're usually rapidly approved throughout the world.
An interesting aspect also is PR and outreach. And with so many distractions in our world, not enough people are aware of the really horrific situation represented by this disease, CF.
Right.
Yet you do have occasional gala events. You invited me
Yes.
to one.
Yes.
It was really heartwarming to meet some of your friends there.
I've heard this across the country. The foundation, again, put a lot of effort into building infrastructure around boards and what have you to get community involvement. And I've always said, the United States of America is the most generous nation, and I'm always humbled by the generosity of people in this country and what's made it great.
I also am impressed, but a lot of these charities, they collect a lot of money and they don't produce a meaningful result. It sounds like the CF Foundation,
They're on it.
You've got a track record right now of producing real world results.
And I credit that to that venture philanthropy model, because as you know, there are a lot of research done in ivory towers that somehow get lost and don't get put to commercial use.
It doesn't get translated.
Exactly.
They'll get published in prestigious medical journals, but nobody will take
Follows
it
up.
the next step, which
Right.
is to get it into a clinical trial to see if it's going to work in patients as well as working in laboratory animals
Right.
or under the microscope. So my congratulations.
And I'll tell you, we have a very enthusiastic group, because anytime you're dealing with a disease that was killing children,
Yes.
you'll find parents are very easy to get involved.
I could definitely understand that. And it's unfortunately a challenge for us at Life Extension because we're literally trying to save aging grandparents.
Right,
And
right.
there's just not as much sympathy. But we're going to keep on battling.
It'll get there.
It'll get there because we're all going to be in a predicament.
Exactly.
I'd like us to continue, but we have to pause for these commercial messages. We'll be right back. We're back with Cris Branden and Bill Faloon. Gentlemen, I'd like to ask you, before we continue talking about CF and inspiring solutions, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your current position with Huizenga Holdings.
Oh, I credit the Huizenga family for giving me a good business education in terms that I try to, impart with our local board. But I've been with the family. My background is I'm a certified public accountant. Do a lot of tax and transactional work, and had the good fortune of when I moved back to Florida in 1984, picking up Wayne Huizenga Sr. as a client, and it's been magical since then. So nothing but the greatest things to say. And they had a very philanthropical way. In South Florida, they focused their charitable giving in South Florida. So,
from Humane Society and animal rights.
Everything, as Marty Huizenga would say, kids, critters, and diseases. That was kind of her motto. So.
Yeah, what an exciting company. Blockbuster, AutoNation. Tell us more. I see all the memorabilia here in your offices.
It all started with the garbage truck. So
Wayne actually drove a garbage truck, right?
Actually did. Bought one and started a company. Built it into the largest waste industry company in the world, and then went on and formed number 2 in Republic Services, and then went through Blockbuster, the sports teams, got into other businesses. Then AutoNation came along, so it's been a fun ride.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Bill, you've been an innovator and in the forefront of research into the diseases of aging. Share with Cris a little bit of your background.
Well, we've tried to do the same thing and really made it exclusively related to aging and the degenerative diseases associated with it. We formed our group in 1977, started publishing a newsletter in 1980, and we've since grown to be the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging medical group. If there's a technology that might slow or possibly even reverse certain pathological aging processes, we investigate it. If it looks good under the microscope, we'll do an animal study. If the animals start to grow younger, we'll sponsor a clinical trial to see if a group of older people can reverse at least some aspects of biological aging. In about half of the studies that we fund, we see clinical results. We see a response analogous to what happened in the animal model. So we're doing a number of combined interventions now where we're using 2 or 3 different modalities to induce meaningful improvements, rejuvenation effects in older individuals. And as we grow, we're hoping more and more people will participate in the clinical studies and also help fund them, because we're doing it pretty much on our own right now with a few other contributors. But once people realize that there are regenerative technologies available right now that can at least help an older person cope with aging better, I think they'll get a little bit more enthused about it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things you mentioned, the animal studies, and it made me think about a couple of years ago, the CF Foundation puts on the National American Conference, which scientists, healthcare providers from around the world come in, and it's a 4-day convention type thing with a lot of science going on and what have you. But they have their major speeches for the lay people like myself, not the scientists, and they talked about we talked about CRISPR-Cas earlier. With their animal studies, they are using CRISPR-Cas to change the airway DNA in the animal to human, so that they can test and get a more adequate human response, what they'll expect from the drug. So I thought that's pretty amazing.
We're not that far away from people living a very long, healthy lifespan. We're not that far away from it. That's very, very interesting how there's just so many crossovers here.
Fascinating. And CRISPR-Cas9 and Dr. Church at Harvard, we're supposed to meet with him soon.
Yeah, George Church, he is working with CRISPR-Cas9 to reverse aging in dogs right now. And if it works in dogs, he plans to be one of the first humans to be self-experimented with. George Church is my age, 64, and he believes aging will be reversible in our lifetime. And he's as, let's say, desperate as I am to make it happen sooner rather than later.
The fount of youth.
I mean, that is now becoming a biological reality.
Right.
It really started around 2014, where the animal studies started to consistently reveal that if you do certain interventions, you're going to reverse aging in older animals. And when we started to apply some of those to people, we were seeing some of those benefits. It's now time to combine them all. And we have an annual event normally on the west coast of the United States. There's a lot more interest in the California area in restoring youth than there is here in Florida. So we have an annual event out there, just like you mentioned. It's called the Revolution Against Aging and Death. And we bring in scientists from around the world, and they try to bring it down and talk in lay language as much as they can to let about 1,000 people know what kind of progress they're making. And I give a couple talks to bring it down to super lay language so people can fully comprehend how close we may be to finding real solutions to biological aging.
There are rumors, not totally published to this effect, but with these modifiers, they're seeing, and I've heard about this, they're seeing some reversals of lung damage, which nobody thought was possible.
Fantastic.
That and the pancreas is, for most CF sufferers, is non-functional. And they're getting some functionality back to the pancreas with these same drugs.
Fantastic.
So
Are they seeing anything with pulmonary fibrosis, perhaps, with these drugs?
I'm not familiar with that, but very well.
There may be a crossover there.
Yes.
So very, very interesting.
Yep. All made possible with this high throughput screening on testing these molecules. Being able to look at a lot of things very rapidly, which used to take a long time to look at each one. So you were looking for the needle in the haystack, and it was which haystack. Now they know the haystack, they know where in the haystack they're working with, and they just keep improving it. So
and yet in deep learning artificial intelligence, which is rapidly expanding in just about every realm. And we've got people that present at our conference about how they're trying to accelerate their ability to mine data. And if you can put enough pieces together, you know, your technology, which is working so well against cystic fibrosis, could very well lead to so many other cures.
Would love to see that happen. Would love to see that happen.
Very much so.
Bill, a final thought before we conclude this show.
Final thought. Well, I deal mainly with the degenerative diseases related to aging, and we at Life Extension, we didn't have a lot of knowledge about cystic fibrosis. In fact, before I came, I mined our database, and we had only a few rather trivial suggestions to help people out. And with this wealth of information that's been developed over the last 5 to 10 years, this is a tremendous breakthrough, and the world pretty much does not know about it yet. That's what's amazing.
And again, we were talking about, CF, it's an orphan disease. We roughly have 30,000 sufferers in the United States, probably about 30,000 in Europe. So when you're looking at that population, it's not a lot. But there are, in the United States, there's 10 million carriers of the defective gene. It's worthwhile to go get it solved. It is the #1 genetic disease, but I think we're probably finding out a lot of things are genetic.
Yes, they are, because we're just now identifying the genes.
Right.
Gentlemen, this has been most interesting. Bill, thank you for being with us. And of course you, Cris. We have to do this yet again one of these days.
We will. It'll be a cure, so we'll have even better news.
We have to celebrate that.
Tremendous. Absolutely tremendous.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be right back.
Life Extension magazine brings you new discoveries in health and anti-aging. Our science-based research and supplements are so advanced they're many years ahead of the medical mainstream, with quality control standards that exceed FDA mandates. Life Extension has covered groundbreaking medical research for more than 35 years. For your health and future, you deserve the best. Learn more at lifeextension.com.
The preceding program was sponsored by RCP Productions Incorporated and Friends of the Shalom Show.